Okay, welcome back to Middle Fingers Up. I'm your host, Kiran, and today I'm sitting with someone whose work sits right at the heart of emotional healing. She's a certified grief and loss recovery specialist, an NLP practitioner, and someone whose lived experience has been navigating divorce and stigma in our South Asian community. She will be here to unpack grief with us, but we're not just talking about grief as in death. We're talking about grief and loss that goes beyond that, and it comes in many forms that many of us don't recognize is happening in real time. And I think what I'm most excited about today is to talk to Palak about how we carry this different grief silently across generations culturally, and how do we navigate the space between. So welcome, Palak. Let's get into it. How are you today?
I'm doing well, thanks, Kiran. I have watched most of your podcast and I'm feeling honored to be here. So thank you.
That's so awesome. Thank you. I'm glad that you are a supporter. I'm also glad you're here in the space. Lately, as I was telling you, it's been me and then folks online. And so I have not been able to have anyone in real time with me in a long time because everyone's really not in Calgary. So this has been an honor to have you in the new kind of renowned space. So welcome.
Yeah,
let's do it. So if we can, I'd love to just start a little bit about you. You're South Asian, I'm South Asian, and anytime one of us is in the work of mental health or in your avenue, grief and loss recovery, there's always a story attached to how we got there. So I'd love to hear why grief and loss, what brought you to that part of the field. Can you share that with us?
Oh, yes. Since a very young age, I have been working in the same profession. At the age of 19, I started working with kids with autism and worked as a human services professional in the same profession and in different capacities. And I'm also trained as a counselor.
Yeah.
So grief and loss, why I chose grief and loss. I feel that dealing with the loss is such an unavoidable part of everyone's life. We all go through that. And grieving, I feel that, since it's so unavoidable, experience, I feel that, there should be more awareness around it. I couldn't find many programs, many support groups to support people going through grief. Not a lot of people in our community do have knowledge about it as well. Like, many times I had to explain what grief even means, right? So that's why I thought that since, this is something I would like to work towards, pursue, and help other people carry loss in their life in an effective way. Yeah.
You make a good point. It's not avoidable.
Yeah.
But there's such a lack of awareness.
Yeah.
And so why do you think that is in our community?
I feel that because when there are unprocessed emotions while someone is grieving, it can be confused. It can be perceived as something else because the signs of unprocessed grief is very, very similar to someone having depression, clinical depression, or high functioning anxiety, or any other mental health disorder. So usually I feel that people get confused and they perceive it as, having depression or anxiety or high level of stress. They don't really realize that it could be, unprocessed emotions related to grief. So I think that's the reason why it gets confused as well. Also, what I have noticed, people from our community, South Asian community, they do not have support system around that where they can really talk to someone about loss. It's still a big thing to talk about, the loss they have experienced in their lives. And most of the times, it does get they get wrong advice, okay, replace your loss, move on. You should be over by now. There's a timeline to your grief, right? So that is another reason why people just feel that, they should just maybe not open up about what they have been experiencing
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also think sometimes it's like gender roles. In my experience growing up, if we just even think of death as the grieving loss, that's the most simplest one to look at. Someone dies, you go to a funeral, and we have a very interesting, I think, even therapeutic process. You have people coming to your house, people you haven't seen, people are willing to bury hatchets, and if they haven't talked to you for years, they'll still show up and support you. There's food involved, there's days, there's prayer, there's all these sorts of things. You have auntie coming, helping you cry it out really loud, all these sorts of things. But there's like such a short period of time, and then it's all over and everyone leaves. And I've seen family members, loved ones, even the men in our family be so stoic, keep such a straight face, and sort of care for everybody by fixing things and going and getting, the water, the tea, all these sorts of things. And I always wondered about how can we love people so deeply, but then when we lose them, we're expected to, like you said, get over it, move on. Why do you think in our community it's such a disconnect? Sometimes it's like if the person was worth the love, or whatever we're grieving was worth the experience, shouldn't the time that we put in also align in how much we're allowed to grieve? But why are we told, get over it, move on?
I feel that, Kiran, thanks for bringing that up, because I feel that it is so deeply conditioned, deeply rooted in our belief system that time heals everything. So if you give it time, all wounds do get healed. Well, I don't believe that, because if time heals everything, we wouldn't be sad about, loss we have experienced 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Also, there's another phrase which we commonly hear, life goes on.
Yeah.
Well, it does goes on, but it doesn't mean that you have to forget about what you have experienced in your life or forget about your past.
Yeah.
Life goes on, but I think a person should be comfortable enough to carry, their past with them while they're embracing the change in their life. So I think in our community, we are conditioned that way to believe that time heals all wounds.
Yeah, I think that's well said, because like I was saying to you before we started recording, I lost grandparents years ago, and every day I have a moment where I'm either crying or I'm thinking about them, because they were such an important part of my life. And so why wouldn't I, throughout my life, not keep grieving that? And I think sometimes we're told, like you said, not only to get over it, but move forward. And we're often chasing after the happy emotion. And grief is always looked at as a bad thing, sadness. And so wouldn't it be so amazing if we all experienced grief in a way of like, that's also a really good emotion to have? Or am I wild to think that? Like, is that okay to think that grief is like something sacred and something to also be proud of, just like happiness is?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. That's what I tell all my clients. No emotion is a bad or good emotion.
Yeah.
Emotion is emotion, right? And every emotion is trying to teach us something. We can use it as a teaching tool if we want to. All of the emotions. And I feel that, as you said, that we should be proud of grief, because grief is love.
Yeah.
It's the love. In simplest ways, I have to explain grief to someone, I tell them grief is dealing with an unmet expectation. So you didn't expect your grandparents to be passed away. You didn't expect that a relationship is going to end, right? So it is dealing with an unmet expectation.
Yeah.
And of course, it's not easy. It's normal to be sad. It's normal to feel hurt. It's normal to be disappointed. So yeah, I think all these emotions needs to be seen as emotions, not good or bad emotions.
Yeah. That's really well said. I agree, because otherwise then we're just chasing after something that's not possible, which is being happy all the time.
Yeah.
And if I want to experience happiness, then I have to also be open to experiencing all those other emotions as well. And I think a lot of times in our community, we're only taught certain emotions too. So if, you look at therapists have that pillow with the wheel and there's like thousands of emotions.
That's right.
That's overwhelming because there's a lot on there that a lot of people don't know exist, but they're feeling them, they're experiencing them, and they just haven't labeled them yet. And I think it's definitely something for all of us to explore that, can we increase the vocabulary of what other emotions are there than angry, happy, sad? There's all these other versions of sadness, guilt, shame, anger comes with all these other underlying feelings, but we just stick to the few that we somehow learned. And I think that can get confusing. But I want to ask a little bit about you. So you told us why you pick grief work. What was your own first experience of deep emotional loss?
I'm pretty sure, Kiran, I have experienced loss since a very young age.
Yeah.
But I think I didn't realize that how it was affecting my life back then. Now, when I look back at my life, I realize that there were moments when I felt confused about my life. I had a really hard time to adapt to transition, change. For example, when I moved to Canada, I'm super grateful that I moved to this country. But back then, I didn't know what the future holds for me. I completely shut down. I didn't want to communicate with my family members. I didn't want to communicate with my closed ones. I just wanted to focus on myself because I didn't know how to deal with uncertainty, how I'm going to move forward, if, what career path I'm going to take. My life in India was way different, right? I had a plan for my life, which I had to let go of because of moving to Canada. Now, back then, I thought that, this extreme sadness, the hurt I feel, might be clinical depression, but it wasn't depression. It was unresolved emotions associated with grief. And see, that's something, I realize now, like how many of immigrants might be going through this and they don't even know that it is grief.
Yeah.
So that was, I would say, like, an eye-opener for me, that experience, because back then I didn't know much about grief. I didn't even know like why I'm feeling that way. I thought that, I'm just maybe getting close to getting clinical depression, right? But now I feel that, since I have got this knowledge, now I know that, it was super quick for me to kind of like, moving to Canada, even the decision was like super quick. I didn't get time to process my emotions. I didn't get time to think about, what I'm letting go of. And it was just unresolved emotions attached to grief.
Yeah. I think you make such a good point bringing this example up, because so many people, like you said, so many immigrants can relate to this. And I wonder sometimes, and even as we're talking now, for some people it's survival, it's safety, you have to leave your country, so you're grieving in a different way. And then there's others that come because it's a choice, it's happiness. And again, you're supposed to be grateful. And you even said, I'm so grateful that I came to this country. And you have to be happy you got something that other people back home didn't get. And it's like an accomplishment that, okay, I moved to a different country like Canada. But even when good things happen, we can still go through the process of grief. And it sounds like that's what that was for you. At that age, now you know things that maybe you didn't know then. But at that age, what did you need from other adults around you, from the community around you that, now you could ask for, maybe then they weren't aware either. What could you have used from the people around you to work through that process?
I think a validation of what I was feeling. Someone being there to validate my feelings, because everyone around me kept telling me, you need to be happy.
There you go. Yeah.
It's a good opportunity for you. You should be grateful for that. Well, I feel grateful for that now, but back then it was a big change for me to go through. And that kind of like created quite a bit of conflict on like how I should feel and how I was feeling back then. There was quite a bit of conflict because I was like, everyone around me is happy that I have moved here, and they're telling me that I should be happy, but I'm not happy. I'm hurt that I had to leave the life I thought that how I expected my life to be.
Sometimes we grieve the lack of control.
That's
like
right.
you said, back home, you knew what your circumstances were, how things were going to be, good or bad. You at least knew. Now you're in this new environment that you have to adapt to. And there's a lot that comes out of that. And I even think about my parents' generation, my grandparents' generation, a lot of them immigrated for survival. And there was a lot of gratefulness then, but there was also a lot of suppressing your emotions. You talked earlier about we're conditioned. They were also conditioned when they came here to, put your head down and do what you got to do. And today, I think our immigrants that are coming, they have a lot of different experiences. They also have a lot of different knowledge that they get to show up with. You have technology, you have social media, you have all these sorts of things at your hand that can sort of help you prepare. But still, you may go through a transition where, again, it's like, I don't know what's about to happen. So what would you say to people today that are immigrating, that are expected to be grateful and happy to be here, but are anxious, but are worried, but are scared, but are whatever they're feeling? What would you say to them and those around them to work through that process?
I would like to remind that their emotions are valid. That's what I will tell them.
Yeah.
It is important to acknowledge what they're feeling, and whatever they're feeling, whether it's anxiety or fear, it's normal and natural.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great message. Is there anything that they can do to help them feel the normal and make it feel more natural?
Of course, like having the right kind of support system, but I understand that could be difficult, especially for a person who just moved here, to develop that support system. There are some personal tools which a person can use, for example, journaling, writing whatever they have been feeling, right? Really giving yourself that validation.
Yeah. Sometimes journaling is great. And a lot of guests come here and talk about that, whether it's from personal or professional experience. And then for some people, journaling can be overwhelming because you look at the piece of paper and you're like, I don't even know what I'm feeling.
Yeah.
So is there a prompt or something that you would suggest that they could start them off with that? If there's folks that are like, I don't know what to write.
And it's very normal to feel that way, not know where to start from.
Yeah.
So there are guided journals as well. How I encourage someone just get started on it is write 3 thoughts which has been occupying your mind lately. 3 thoughts. Which ones are they? Just write them down. Then write the emotions associated with those thoughts. How are they making you feel? And what are opportunities you can provide yourself to host those emotions in the current moment? So someone can start with that prompt. However, there are quite a lot of guided grief journals which people can find online.
Yeah. I think that's great. That's a great way to start the prompts with what are the thoughts and then what are the feelings that are emotions, as you said, attached to that. And that's also a great way to like be curious about ourselves. Cause like we were saying, with that, again, pillow with the wheel, some of us don't even know what some of those spaces we're living in are, what they mean. Like I'm 44 and I'm only learning now some things and I've worked in mental health all my life. And even I'm like, this is a new feeling. So I think we have to give ourselves some grace as well, is that when you're so about yourself, it's hard to see the big picture and step out. And that's why going and talking to someone can be helpful too. Yeah. Someone that can give an outside perspective as well and help us make sense of some of the things that we're feeling or thinking. And I know sometimes therapy isn't the way to go for our community, but definitely it's something I'll keep supporting as well, is something that can be helpful to talk out. And so if that's not possible, then the journaling is a good place to start.
That's right. And also, Kiran, I wanted to mention, when it comes to grief, there are some losses which we usually talk about. For example, death of a loved one, divorce, end of a relationship. Even immigration is a less talked about event, which people sometimes don't even know that, grief is associated with that life transition as well. Same for like fading friendships, right? Retirement, marriage, becoming a parent. Yeah. Job loss as well. We feel that, okay, there's always a replacement we can find. If we lost our job, you can find another job. But sometimes it can affect you more than you expected. And that happened to me as well back in 2023. I started working when I was really young, like at the age of 19. And since then, I have been like high achiever. Sometimes I work multiple jobs. That's my personality, always doing this and that, and always wanted to work, right? And have been working from a very young age. Back in 2023, I was working for a company, and it was a term position. It came to an end. And it took me 3 months to find another job, even though 3 months sounds like a, short period, but it affected me more than I expected. I thought that, in the beginning, I was like, that's fine. I have this work experience. I will find another job. I knew that I will find another job. But sitting at home those 3 months for a person who has been working from a young age, it affected me. I isolated myself. After a few weeks, I just started to feel very, again, frustrated, sad, disappointed. Like I wasn't used to sitting at home without work.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why it's so important to understand grief. I was grieving, at that time. And of course, there are like some common life events we all talk about. There's grief associated with those ones, but also important to know that there are other life transitions which do, make a person to go through grief as well.
Yeah, I think some of the ones you listed off, you make a good point, because in some ways, invisible pain. It's transitions, like you said, marriages, divorces, loss of friendship, all these kinds of things that happen, and we treat it as it's natural. They're all going to happen. You may get married, you may not, you may have a kid, you may not. But we don't talk about, again, those spaces in between where we feel the things, and people grieve differently. There's similarities, but for someone else that might be like 3 months, I got a vacation. Yay. And for you, not so much. And so I think you have to start to learn who you are as an individual as well, and how you're impacted by these sorts of things. Now, how can we, like, is there one thing we can do to take some of that invisible pain we're experiencing and make it more visible for ourselves? Is there something that we can do to help bring it to the surface and recognize that, oh, these things actually bother me more than I thought they did? Or these things bothered me 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and only now I'm realizing that actually affected me a lot. Sometimes that happens later in life. So is there something we can do to bring that invisible pain out and start to hold it and experience it?
Yeah, of course. Like talking to someone, expression. I always say that expressing your emotion it's such a helpful tool, right? Find a way to express your emotions, whatever you feel comfortable with. It could be journaling, it could be talking to someone, it could be through creativity as well, creating something, art, And also, as I said, that having that support system around you who can listen to you without holding any judgment.
Yeah, that's huge, right?
Yeah. And we are usually drawn towards family or friends, but sometimes we have to expand our horizon and just explore more. It could be a professional as well, right? Your family members, your friends are not trained. Of course, they're going to do their best to listen to you, but they're not trained to validate your emotions. So also really accepting that emotional sensitivity is not weakness. That's another thing.
Yeah.
People, I'm feeling this emotion. I am a weak person. No, it's not like that.
Yeah.
Because that is also very deeply conditioned in South Asian community. Opening about how you're feeling, sometimes it's perceived as a weakness, or you're like highly sensitive person. But emotional sensitivity is not a weakness.
Yeah, I worry about that because that comes up so much in our community. What will people say? We have to look a certain way. The generations before us, they immigrated on being model minorities, doctors, lawyers, all these people that were brought into the country to be the good immigrants.
Yeah.
And that's been passed on from generation to generation. I'm a first generation of immigrants. And so being born and raised here, even in how I might look at grief and loss and recovery is going to be different than my parents. And that's okay.
Yeah.
My parents did the best they could, but they had the pressures of surviving, getting the jobs and making it through. So the rest of us, we say they survive so we can thrive. And I think that sometimes we we look to our other generations or people around us, and, they'll say things like, oh, I turned out fine. And I'm not looking to turn out fine. I don't want my kids to just turn out fine. I think we have to sort of push that a little bit. And can we turn out better than that or healthier than that? Because fine is one thing, but a lot of people in our community end up having a lot of health issues. The mind will put it on the body. That's the way that it works. And we don't connect those things together. As you've said, we've been conditioned for years to look at it as, oh, this is a weakness. So again, any feedback for those that are listening or saying, oh, whatever, I'm fine, or we'll be okay, or I don't have time for this. Is there anything you can encourage people to maybe stop and think about or try? I feel like all humans are worthy of grief, are worthy of going through that experience, and some don't think they are. So what would you say to folks that think they're not worthy of this?
We human beings, we do have this need of being heard, being seen. It's very normal. We are social beings, right? So it's normal to express your emotions or connect with other people.
Yeah.
There is this need of being heard. Also, there's this need of being seen. And, seeing a professional or developing a support system around you, or really like talking about your emotions, even though you're feeling that you don't need to, you're fine, right? This need of a human being, it needs to be fulfilled.
Yes.
So that's why it's okay to talk about your emotions. Even though you feel that, I'm fine, I will be fine. With time, I will get better. That's
right.
another
Yeah,
thing.
Here we go. Yeah, there's the time again. Yeah.
Yeah. Or I have to be strong for others. That's another
That's
another
a huge thing for our community. Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's people depending on you, and you put that pressure on yourself, and others put it on you. And I agree. I had that written in here too, is that we do this. The thing though that, when I was sitting down and preparing for our episode, I was thinking about this, and even for me, I think how my lack of grieving certain losses, certain parts of my childhood, even I was saying to you, okay, like becoming a mom, I should be grateful, I should be happy, because some people can't have kids, but I didn't enjoy it all the time. I sucked at it, I felt. And when I look back now, I miss some things that I wish I could have been more present. I was there, but I wasn't mentally, emotionally present.
That's right.
And so how has it shown up over the years? It's shown up by being a people pleaser. It's shown up by being a perfectionist. It's shown up in these ways that I think a lot of people in our community have these traits. We want everyone to be okay. We want to tell everyone we're okay. No, mom, I'm not sick. No, mom, I'm fine, because you don't want everyone to worry about you. All of these things play a part. And it just goes back to those of us that think we're fine. How many of those of us that think we're fine are people pleasers, are perfectionists, and have this fear of abandonment? Probably all of us do. Yeah. And so I think this is where I encourage us, and as you're encouraging, we have to dig deeper, because it's not as simple as living through this wild life of I'm okay. Sure, we will be today. These things show up in different ways, and it's not just crying. Grieving isn't just crying.
Yeah.
It's like you said earlier, you were going through anger and depression when you had immigrated. So I think we forget, or we're not aware of the different ways it can show up. Can you take us through that and some ways that it can show up for us?
Oh, yes. Yes, definitely. So what I feel, first of all, there's a reminder for everyone listening. It is okay not to be okay.
Yeah.
It's important.
Better be, because I've said it 100 times about myself. So thank you.
Yeah.
Or maybe you're just telling me that.
Because that is something we lack. We have to be okay. We
have to get over it, right?
We have to get over it. There's a timeline, it's been 3 months now, you should forget about it, stuff like that. I ask my clients, like, when you try to talk about your loss to a loved one, what kind of advice you receive back? And most of the times they tell me, they told me to forget about it, or they told me that, it's been a long time now, like you should be over it by now. Or they tell me, okay, find a replacement. Just get into another relationship, find another job, find a replacement. It's not even a big deal. So I ask my clients, like, and how from there they can take on to change that perception for themselves, or carry the grief in a way that, they learn to acknowledge what they have been feeling rather than suppressing their emotions. So back to your question, I think it's important. It's a collective. I feel that it's a collective motive, right? We all get this opportunity to, of course, like carry our own grief effectively, and also provide opportunity to others so that they can carry their grief effectively as well. So for example, if someone is willing to open about talking about their loss to me, I provide the person a safe space so that they can talk about it. I acknowledge what they may be going through. I provide that validation. I feel that seeing it as a collective responsibility is important, especially in our community.
Yeah.
It's not just individual.
Yeah.
It's not that, okay, this person is going through this, so he or she needs to find a way to carry this loss in their life. It's even people around that. We need to see it as a collective responsibility.
And that's what I love about our community is we are very collective. Sometimes we're too much in each other's business, but then sometimes it's not for all the right things too.
That's right.
And even though we come from a great community where we can be collective, we can still feel isolated because there's the pressure of, again, well, if I tell everyone or if everyone knows about it. But what I hear you saying is, look at it in a way of, okay, if I don't manage this, it's going to impact my household. It's going to impact my relationships with my other family members. And so how can I start to manage some of my stuff so that everyone else can also have an opportunity to work through some of that too? If my sister sees me in a healthy way going through this grieving process, that maybe that will open the door for her to want to go through that. And so I think that's one thing that I love about the collective approach. And the other piece too is the Western world doesn't do that. I worked in mental health for years. We suck at it. It was terrible. I was conditioned to do a very individualistic way. Even though there's family systems theory and all this, it's very much about the client. And what I love is that there are more people from our community that are starting to enter this field, like you, other therapists that are coming in, so that there's more people that look like us when we want the help. And I think a lot of South Asians that I've spoken to about why they don't go to therapy is because they've gone to therapy, but it's been a white person and they've never gone back because it was very individualistic, and, it's the cut off people. Don't worry about it. Put boundaries up. But it takes a moment for us in our community to get to that place of a boundary and these kinds of things. And so I do appreciate that you bring in that collective mentality, because I think more people are willing to get help in that way.
Yeah.
When they see that it's like our problem, not my problem or your problem.
Yeah.
As we're talking about tools and things, can I just pause on the grief thing and ask you, because you're also an NLP practitioner. And so can you tell us a little bit about what you do and how that works with your grief and loss recovery?
Yes. So one of the less talked about life event, loss of self-identity.
Yeah.
I feel that, that happens when a person holds limiting beliefs. And there's always a reason for that, like childhood experiences could be one of the reasons. NLP in that way, like if there's a client looking for support to overcome limiting beliefs, then I incorporate NLP techniques.
Okay. So use it as a tool. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because NLP is all about activating your subconscious mind.
Okay.
We are not as aware that, most of the decisions we make as a human being, we are actually like run by our subconscious mind, not the conscious mind. And NLP helps us to understand the power of some subconscious minds. And there are quite a lot of techniques in NLP techniques which are used to activate the subconscious mind to really understand, okay, this is the pattern I have been following in my life. This is the pattern I hold, how to break free from that.
Yeah, I feel like language plays a part, right? Like sometimes we don't realize we're saying something a certain way, and that is what we believe and whatnot. And other people can see it, but we can't see it sometimes. Is that does that play a part in there too?
Yes, that's right. Because, for some reason, like our mind has like adapted to this way of behaving, or this, the belief system, as you said, right? We don't know that we carry this belief system, which needs to be reanalyzed and changed, right? So NLP helps to analyze your belief system and break free from any unhealthy patterns.
Yeah.
So that's when I incorporate NLP techniques with my grief recovery clients when they're really struggling to deal with loss of self-identity,
Yeah.
not sure what's going on. They feel that they're very disconnected from themselves. The life they expected is completely different from the reality. And now they're experiencing this loss of self-identity. Then I try to incorporate these NLP techniques to help them understand why they're feeling that way, what might be their belief system, and also how we're going to reframe the thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think that's common for people is the life that I expected isn't the life that I'm living.
Yeah.
How do you help your clients fill that space and understand that? Because sometimes, if I'm like, oh, I thought I would be happier, more successful, or I would be more appreciative of these sort of things that I have in my life, but I'm not. Is that how it is? Like, what is it that makes us think that this is the way it should have been, but we're not accepting the way it is? Or how does that work?
That's right. So you gave a very good example. Someone feeling that, okay, I should, receive more appreciation, for example, but that's not how it is, right? Making that person to analyze why the person is feeling that, he or she needs to, receive that appreciation. What belief system? Why that belief system is there? Is it related to the childhood experiences? Right? So we really get into, like, as I said, the subconscious mind, the pattern. The person might be, okay, every single time I, do something, I feel that I should receive appreciation, right? So then I use one of the NLP techniques to, help them reframe their thoughts. Okay, you did not receive the appreciation for, like, in this specific situation. What are the other outcomes, right? Maybe you're perceiving it as a negative event. You did not receive the appreciation, but can there be other outcomes? Can it turn into something positive? Can it turn your life into something positive? So stuff like that, reframing thoughts. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm thinking of, like, even a lot of our elders, especially our moms, they do a lot of things for us. They cut our fruit, they take care of us, they do our laundry, they do all these things to show love. And not all of us reciprocate that or say thank you or whatnot. And sometimes I think, even for me as a mom, these things that I'm doing for my kids, am I doing them for myself or am I doing that for them? And we get lost in this weird place of, my kids should be thankful. My kids should show that they, love me back. But we all have such different ways of showing love. And so do you in some ways help those clients find a different way to ask for that appreciation?
That's right.
So, like, being in charge of it in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So of course, like, understanding where it is coming from, because our belief system, I read about research studies, and there's one research study I came across which says that most of our limiting beliefs, right, they're formed before the age of 7.
Yeah.
So our childhood does play, like, quite a bit of role
for sure
into that. And like the example you gave, like, expecting from your kids, self-validation part, right? If seeking validation from others. There's this client I worked with, and she was struggling with the same thing, always wanting to get that validation from others. And through NLP, I made her realize that there are 2 parts which exist in you. There's one looking for validation from others, and then there's another part which knows that you are a resourceful person and you can validate yourself. So in any moment when you get triggered to, get that validation from others, which part you're going to listen to? Are you going to listen to the part looking for validation from others, or the part where you can create that validation for yourself? Because, making her realize that she's a resourceful person. She doesn't have to look for validation from others all the time. Yeah. Right? It changed her perception on seeking validation. So that's how NLP can help to reframe thoughts. And also, challenging your thoughts is important. That's what I tell my NLP clients. It's okay to challenge your thoughts. Not all your thoughts are true. They're not. Sometimes we experience irrational thoughts as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And whether they're your NLP
Mhm.
clients or not, I think that's a good piece of advice for all of us is challenging these belief
Yeah.
systems. Like, where does this come from?
Yeah.
Even cultural beliefs, sometimes customs. It's like we're so, we have to do this way. And is it okay for it to change? Time heals everything. Can time also change customs and beliefs? And sometimes we hold on to these things because we don't, the unknown we're afraid of and whatnot. But sometimes those belief systems can really get us in trouble, can impact our relationships, and like you said, can really impact our own belief of ourselves. And I think we rather hold on sometimes to this belief that's not serving us than challenging ourselves to say, where did it come from? Maybe someone taught it to me and I love that person and that's the only way I can be connected to them. But is it still working for me? And can I still be connected to that person and think about this in a different way? And I think the point you make about the articles out there, the first 7 years in a child's life are very, very important. I really, really encourage us, especially those of us that are parents, to look at that and think about that and figure out how we can show up for our kids. And they're, even as adults, for myself, I think that's something that I go back and do a lot is go in the time machine and talk to myself a lot, because a lot of things didn't happen and a lot of things did happen. And I needed different things as a child. And now they're showing up as a 44-year-old woman. Now I'm like, oh my gosh, this is because this stuff happened when I was a kid, or I didn't get this thing, or how come, these things were said to me years ago and why are they still impacting me now? And it is at this age, what I feel grateful for is that we can break barriers. When we challenge these belief systems, we have an opportunity to do something different that, again, people before us or the generations before us didn't get to do that. They didn't have the tools that we get to have today. These things weren't available to our family members that are our parents and our elders. And so I think there's a lot more available to us today to help us sort of challenge it. But that's if we want it, right? I mean, I think sometimes we're not ready for that. When your clients come to you, like, how do they know and how do you know they're ready for this treatment, ready for work?
I tell them that they play the most important role in the process of healing. I'm just there to guide them. But, they have to make that decision that they're going to come out of the pattern they have been following, whether it's even for grief and loss recovery program, the way I was trained on this program, it says that, the person has to take at least 1% of responsibility of how they're responding to the loss they have experienced. So it's on them. And that's how I know that if they show that, they're ready to take that responsibility, that it is my job to, start this journey of healing, or at least work on this pain, which has been like passing on or like in my life, I know that, they're ready to do the work, because I only play like 30% of role in this, whether it's NLP or grief and loss, right? It's on the client to do most of the work. And also them being vulnerable, how comfortable they're feeling to be vulnerable, because all of these suppressed emotions they do come to surface while they're going through the process,
That must be scary.
That must be scary. How comfortable are they feeling? How ready do they feel to, go through that? Because I tell them right in the beginning that it is very normal, to get re-triggered, I would say, or to, like all of these unresolved emotions coming to the surface. They have to be vulnerable in this process,
and trusting of themselves that okay, I'm here, I can work through this slowly. What brings your clients to you? Like, what are the top kind of grief and loss sorts of topics that show up when they show up?
End of a relationship. I would say the most common one. So
like divorce, separation, breakup.
Yes.
So end of a relationship, like two friends or more like partners?
Both, I would say.
Both. Look at that, hey?
And romantic relationships, mostly divorce as well. And them just struggling, like not even understanding that they don't have to forget about their past in order to move forward. That's what, my clients kept trying to forget about it completely before they realized that, it's not possible. I need to maybe, talk to a professional who can help me carry, my past while I'm moving forward in my life. That's what I tell my clients as well, that you do not have to erase your past. It's a part of you. It's a part of your life.
Yeah.
You don't have to try to erase your past completely, or not like looking back or thinking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Try not to suppress your emotions. There is a way you can move forward in your life, but also carry the loss with you. So that's what grief is about. It's kind of like carrying this stone in your pocket. You feel the heaviness, but it doesn't mean that, you can't do your day-to-day stuff or move forward in your life.
Right.
You feel that heaviness, but you learn to carry it in a healthy way with you.
Yeah. Without, I would imagine, shame.
Yeah.
Especially if it's romantic relationships in our community, divorce. There's a huge stigma around that. You were a child of divorce. I'm sure you work around it all the time. I've seen it around too. And marriage is so sacred in our community.
Yeah.
And it's kind of what you grow up to do. You're told that's what you do. And we hold on to it so hard that when it doesn't work, I think it breaks people.
Yeah.
And maybe you can speak to that, your experience working with people. What are some things that you see coming out in the community that we're struggling with? And what are some things you're seeing that we're doing good work with as well?
Yeah. I feel that, as I said, that, most of the clients, they have like tried very, very hard to forget about what, their past relationship. They couldn't do it. Then they feel that, okay, like now I need to get in touch with a professional because I can't forget about it, right? And I tell them that there's no way you can forget about it. It's a part of your life, right?
Can I ask why do we want to forget about it?
Because I think, again, it comes to the conditioning in our community. I said that we feel that there's a timeline to grief, right? After a certain number of months, or, if it's been years, like you're told that, by now you should have just moved on. So just forget about it. Find a replacement. That's what happens when someone goes through divorce as well. I feel that, so quickly the way the process is, so quickly they get involved into, of course, like figuring out the legal matter.
Right. Okay.
They don't even get time to attend to their emotions.
Yeah.
I feel that there's no time, right? And then it comes to the surface later on, which is very normal. I feel that a lot of divorcees, they do tell me that, they didn't even have time. Like they had to figure out what's the next step in their life. They didn't have time to think about, how they're going to deal with their emotions. Of course, there were emotions. They were, but there was no time. They were,
if they have kids, then all that on top of it adds some complexity too.
And also, if that brings financial crisis, then they're so much focused on dealing with this other stuff, they don't get time to deal with the unprocessed emotions. And here's another thing. We do grieve toxic relationships. That's another thing which I have realized, especially when I'm working with someone who just ended a relationship. Whether it's a divorce or a breakup, they feel that they knew that it was a toxic relationship they cannot carry in their life, and why they have to feel sad about it.
Because it was a bad thing that happened, right? And if it's bad, it doesn't deserve it. But at the same time, the feelings are happening. That's very interesting. Yeah. So how do you help them come around and see that you're worthy of grieving still? So again, validating their emotions, also making them understand that grief is a natural process, right? And even though two emotions can coexist. Yes, right? At the same time. At the same time. Yeah. They're happy that the relationship ended because it was toxic, but also it's normal to feel sad about it, that it ended. So these kind of reminders do help. Yeah. That's again, something I have noticed, especially people going through divorce. They just realize that the relationship was toxic. So it's not worthy to, grieve the process. Right. Yeah. Sometimes I wonder too, though, so maybe, let's say it was toxic. I personally, I've left some friendships recently, and some friendships have left me. And there was a mix of different things going on. And I think part of the grieving process we have to understand too is I'm evolving and I'm changing, and I have to grieve the old me as well. And I think sometimes we put a lot of pressure or a lot of spotlight on that person, but they're not there anymore. And we can grieve them, we can miss them, we can be confused about why we're missing them, if they were toxic or not. But we also are grieving ourselves too, because who we were is going to be different now when those people aren't in our lives. And maybe that's better, maybe that's not. But sometimes I think it's hard to grieve change when it's positive too. Like, I don't know this new me. I knew the other me within that relationship. And now I have to like go through that whole, like, who is this me? And so I think we don't give ourselves time and space to also grieve ourselves and who we were. Is that something that you guys talk about as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely. And, it's not just the loss of a relationship. There are underlying losses as well. For example, loss of trust.
Yes.
Loss of emotional safety. You lost all of that, right?
Yeah.
Loss of identity. You associated yourself with this relationship,
Totally.
right?
Yeah. It's huge.
So, even though you don't want to feel sad about loss of relationship, there are like underlying losses which you have experienced, which of course can be like, that's why I say that all losses are worthy of grief, because there are always underlying losses which you don't even realize that they exist. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think, again, going back to that, basically anything that isn't a funeral, we don't give it enough time. We don't give it enough space to grieve. And here, we've barely even talked about death. We've talked about all these other, as we said, invisible losses and emotions that come up. Whoever's in with your client, I can only talk about me. I'm the common denominator in all of this. So again, these people and these things, maybe it's the job, all these things aren't there, but I'm still here. And I think that's the thing, is that we put ourselves on the back burner. We don't put ourselves in the front when we're working through this. And a lot of people in our community too, I'm one of them, we don't understand what identity is and how we're connected to it. For some, identity is one thing. It could be the career, it could be an illness, it could be being a mother. But we have different parts of our identity, different things that make it up. And so if losing a child or, not being able to have a child, infertility, that's one part of it. That's going to shape you in a different way. Even if I still have my job and even if I have other things, that one thing is still going to impact me. And I think sometimes it's scary, and maybe that's why people want to forget about it, but it doesn't go away. Like whether you want to or not, you said you carry your grief with you, and so you can decide how you want to carry it. You want it to keep coming up and taking over, or do you want to be able to feel like you're in charge of it? And, like you said, that stone in your pocket where you feel it, it's there, but it's not taking over your day or your life. And sometimes I wonder too with grief is it's hard to let go, because if you let go, then it might mean you will forget that loss. And some people don't want to, like a death. Sometimes you want to grieve forever, because if I don't, then I'll forget my grandparents. If I stop grieving or stop being angry or stop feeling, then I won't be able to experience that. And I think that's confusing sometimes too, because we connect the depth of the grief to maybe whether it's the person, the job, or these kinds of things. Is that something that comes up for you as well when you're working with your clients?
Yes, it does. And with someone experiencing that, of course, there's no timeline to grief. You can grieve for a long period of time. You can grieve for your entire life. What this grief and loss recovery is all about, it's about how to manage the pain associated with your grief effectively, right? How to ensure that, that pain hasn't started to affect other aspects of your life.
Right.
Yeah.
That's huge. Yeah. And I think that's a hard thing for people to connect, but you say that so well. Like it doesn't mean you're forgetting the person or the thing that you've lost. It just means that you're learning how to manage it. And maybe that'll help you even more so. And so do your clients, like, how do they in the simplest way work through that and get to that place where they can put it as like a rock in their pocket?
Yeah. So it's a very structured program. There are 7 to 8 sessions. We do quite a lot of writing, emotional expressivity. That's what we practice during the program. They get an opportunity to express unresolved emotions. Also, if there are any unspoken words, for example, if I was still in a relationship with this person, what would I have told the person? Because usually the pain is coming from unspoken words, right?
Unfinished business.
Unfinished
That's true.
business, yeah. So this program provides a person the opportunity to process that unfinished business.
Yeah.
Coming to a completion. Doesn't mean forgetting your past or forgetting what you have experienced, but feeling a sense of completion when you have processed those, unspoken words. You have gotten the opportunity to process emotions associated with it.
Yeah. What are some things that come up for people when they get to go through that unfinished business part?
When it comes to death of a loved one, guilt is a very common one.
Yeah.
I wish I had done this while the person was alive. I wish I had a better relationship, developed a better relationship with the person when the person was alive, or stuff like that. Guilt is a very common one. End of a relationship, when it comes to breakup, divorce, this need of being strong for others, especially single mothers, feeling that, they can't be sad because they have to take care of their kids, the child. It's going to affect the child if, they start to express their sadness or hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What saddens me about that is the kids are watching.
Yeah.
And they have to learn how to walk through life going through pain too. And sometimes we miss these opportunities because we have to be so strong. We can't be weak. But we're sending such a mixed message to others around us when breaking down is great to do in front of your kids. I mean, you don't need your kids taking care of you forever, but how kind is it for a child to be able to feel like they can have that connection with their parent, that, they can give and take. And I think we protect our kids from all these feelings because we want them to be happy. And I think we set them up because, as we said earlier, happiness is not the only feeling that we can walk through life with.
Yeah.
Are your clients able to get to that place and see that?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
And I tell them that, okay, if you don't want to express it in front of your kids, here's the opportunity to express and, of course, process that unfinished business. So that's what the program is about. Also, since like in my life, my close friends, even my family members have gone through divorce. They have experienced divorce. What I have realized that sometimes it does affect their self-esteem, self-worth.
Yeah,
I wasn't good enough to be in that marriage. I must have done something wrong so that, that's the outcome.
Yeah.
So boosting the self-esteem and rebuilding a life where they feel that they're worthy of, even though this happened, they had to get the divorce, but still they're worthy of living a fulfilling life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's such a big message. Self-confidence, self-worth is like, if that's the only thing we can have in life, we're okay, because it allows us to have other things as well. We can rely on ourselves, and that does shake you up for sure. It's what you had said earlier. It's not the life that I imagined. So why did this happen?
Yeah.
And so, I got married. It was supposed to be happiness, all these kinds of things. And we can't predict our outcome. And I think hindsight, what we know after, can sometimes beat us up because we didn't know it then. And so we can't rely on that. It's like, well, what did I know then? And going off of that versus I should have done this, I should have done that. And so I can imagine that would be really difficult for a lot of people to work through. You feel like you're letting your kids down. You're letting the family down. And as we said earlier, the divorce stigma is still, even though there's plenty of divorce happening in our community, just as it is in other communities, the stigma tied around it is what holds a lot of people down.
Yeah.
If you could give advice to us about how to break that stigma, like what would you say? What's one thing that we can do when it comes to the stigma around divorce to like all work on that?
Again, when it comes to reducing the stigma, I see it as a collective responsibility.
Yeah.
It's not the person, who has experienced the divorce. I think it is our responsibility as well to hold that safe space for the person and not hold any judgments. Yeah. Seeing it as like a negative, labeling it as a negative event, right?
Yeah.
Divorce is a negative event. We label it as a negative event. The labeling doesn't need to be there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Like often
Mhm.
if there's no abuse,
Yeah.
again, if it's not the worst thing possible,
Yeah.
then you think, oh, why did you do it? And I
Mhm.
think the women have a lot of pressure on them.
Mhm.
Even recently I went to a wedding and I heard several mother-in-laws
Mhm.
who had sons talking about their daughter-in-laws being the savior of their
Mhm.
son. Like, oh, my son is so lucky to have this wife. I mean,
Mhm.
all those wives are amazing.
Yeah.
But the pressure that's put on the wife, if the
Yeah.
wife can't save him, if the wife can't save the marriage, if the wife can't fix the stuff, then it's going to fall apart. And I think as a community, we have to understand that there's equal parts put in here between both partners when they get married. And it's not
Mhm.
one or the other's responsibility. And as individuals, we are responsible for ourselves. My
Mhm.
husband cannot be responsible for whether I'm going to be a great person or not.
Mhm.
And I can't be that for him, but I
Mhm.
can for myself and he can for himself. And then hopefully we can show up together.
Yeah.
And I just heard a lot about these poor wives and how much pressure they have on. Cause I'm like, if the husband screws up,
Mhm.
if he doesn't, get his act together, then it's going to be on the wife,
Mhm.
and I think we have to shift that and not be talking like that as if it's the wife's responsibility, because that's a lot and
Mhm.
unfair to the women.
Yeah. And another thing which, you gave a really good example. Another situation which is like, I feel that it's very common in the South Asian community when the parents separate, right? There's quite a lot of pressure on the child now. The child has to be a good child. The child needs to fulfill the expectation of the single parent taking care.
Yeah.
Right? The single parent expect quite a lot from the child. Now, since there's no husband, now it's my child's responsibility to create a life for me and so that I can still like live a fulfilling life, right? So imagine what impact it's having on the child.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's why I said it's so important to create that safe space for anyone, who's experiencing a significant loss to really open up and get that opportunity to process emotions, because of course, it's going to have impact on the other relationships in your life as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think the point that you've really driven today
Yeah.
is if we don't take the time to work through it,
Mhm.
it will decide to work through us eventually.
Yeah.
And so we can decide how we want that to go.
Mhm.
And as you've also said, a lot of our decisions are made subconsciously. So sometimes we're not even aware of these
Mhm.
patterns that we're living out every day.
Mhm.
And I think if we're not taking the time to work through the grief and giving it what it deserves, whether it's the loss or the grief, then it's going to make it very difficult in other aspects of our relationships
Mhm.
to function. And I appreciate those points, because I think we don't think about that as much as maybe we should. Or, we say it now, we're like,
Mhm.
oh yeah, that makes sense. But when we're in these everyday busy parts of our life, we're not paying attention and we're not bringing awareness, attunement
Mhm.
to what our body and our mind are doing or going through. And I think it shows up in all sorts of different ways.
Mhm.
Like our physical health, that's what takes the first toll, or our mental health.
Mhm.
And I think we're not superheroes. And for some reason, we're all thinking, or someone told us we are, and we're humans. We
That's
screw
right.
up
Mhm.
and we struggle. And like you said earlier, we can't go through this world alone. Like we can't be
Yeah.
isolated in this. We need validation. We need to be seen and we need to be heard.
Yeah.
We all need that.
Mhm.
And I think you had mentioned this earlier. A big part for us in our community is we want to show up for each other. It means a lot to me if I can show up for you. And in order for me to show up for you, I have to take care of me first.
That's
and
right.
somehow we mix that up and we think, I got to only take care of Palak. It's all about Palak. But how can I do that for Palak if I'm suffering and I'm not paying attention to my own suffering?
That's right.
So how do you help us shift that and start with ourselves and think about ourselves, especially when we're taught to not think about ourselves?
That's right. And it's a great point you made here, Kiran, because I was thinking about this grief and loss program, and I'm equally involved in the program. So I implement everything on myself first, and then my clients see, how loss has affected me, and then they implemented all of the strategies. They implement them on themselves, right? So me as a professional, it's my responsibility to showcase my clients that I'm no different than you. We all experience some kind of loss in our lives.
Yeah.
It's very common, right?
Yeah.
And it has affected me in a way as well. It's not that I'm immune to it, right?
Right.
Just because I know about this program, I'm working in this profession, it doesn't make me immune to, all these emotions and sadness. So, of course, it's so important to deal with your own stuff before you can show up for someone else. And being self-aware.
Yeah.
Being self-aware as well. I know that if someone talks about, a difficult marriage, it triggers me. Because I have become so self-aware that I know that it's going to trigger me in a way like this. That's something my closest family members have experienced, my closest friends have experienced. So just to have that self-awareness that it is going to trigger me sometimes helps you to choose, your response. Respond it to that in an effective way so that, the person who is seeking help from you is not affected by the way you are triggered. Right. So it's important for professionals as well to work on themselves and be self-aware.
Yeah.
I feel that.
Yeah. I think, I know we're not superheroes, but I think if we have self-awareness, that is like a superpower.
Yeah.
And it's not a one-time thing. It's evolving. So maybe today I'm not as aware as I could be, but every day I have an opportunity to wake up and be present.
Yeah.
Do you have some strategies or suggestions when we talk about self-awareness? What does that mean? What are some things we can do to start to get to know ourselves and what triggers us, what makes us, gives us joy, all those kinds of things?
So for me, I usually so if there's a pattern, for example, like the one I just mentioned, that if someone talks to me about a difficult marriage, I know that that's going to trigger me because that has happened to me a lot of times. Then someone opens up about going through a difficult marriage, and then all of a sudden I start to feel very sad, very irritated. I start to associate it with what if this happened to, there's a fear response as well. What if I go through this that, if I experience the same kind of marriage? So my mind playing tricks on me.
Yeah.
So I kind of keep track of if there's any pattern. Right. And that's what I have identified for myself. Also, this self-awareness part, I think it only comes if you really allow yourself to feel your emotions. If you run away from your feelings, how you will know, right? How are you going to cultivate this self-awareness? I think the first step is to really allow yourself to be in that spot, being vulnerable, that this is what I'm feeling. Only then you will be aware of what you're feeling. Yeah.
I'm just thinking of some people that are like, oh, I don't have time for this. I'm busy. I got to work, and it's not how I grew up back home, and whatever. It's fine. And I've already lived along. Now it's about the kids. How do you encourage those people to find the worth in themselves to want to do the work? How do you tell them you are worthy of this?
Again, that comes with of course it's not easy because sometimes it's so deeply rooted. It's such a deeply rooted wound that they have started to believe that they're not worthy of living a fulfilled life or even working on their healing journey. I remind them of, if they can recall an experience in their life when they took the step to work on something and it turned into a positive outcome. That makes them, gain a little bit of confidence that they can at least give it a try.
Right. Yeah. And what about for someone who wants to do this work, has started to do it, but we are in a collective care society, and maybe family around them is not in support of this, don't believe in mental health work. And what would you say to that person who feels alone and wants to do some work, but feels, the pressure because of their family members, maybe partners that are not interested?
Again, I just remind the person that as a human being, we do have this need of being heard and being seen, right? Even though the people around the person is not really like validating that or understanding, but this person does have his own individual need of being heard and being seen, and talk about what's been affecting the person. And also, as I said, that this program is about taking at least 1% responsibility of how the person is responding to the loss. It's about taking responsibility that, okay, I have experienced this loss in my life, and it is my responsibility to carry it in a way so that the pain isn't getting, lingering on in my life.
Yeah.
So that can only happen if you take the responsibility regardless of what's going around you, what other people around you are, if they're able to understand you or not, or if they see any value in this program, or going through grieving in a healthy manner. It's about you.
Yeah. I think that's a really strong message, especially when you think of generational, and again, you think of parents and elders that survived, got through it. And sometimes for maybe our generations and the younger ones, it's like too many feelings. We have too much access to these resources like we talked about. But I still think, and the message still stands, like we as individuals do need to do this work, and we can't live our life based on the fact that, well, our parents went through war and all this kind of survival, and I should just deal with it, especially if it's right here, it keeps coming back. And so I think that message is like important to those community members as well, who don't do the work because they think, oh, my family members went through way worse. And I think that's the other thing with grief is sometimes we compare. Right?
Comparison. Yeah.
So like, you went through something way worse than me. So then I don't deserve, I should just get over. I just lost my job. You lost a loved one. And so do people show up comparing as well? And what do you say to them?
They do. All losses are valid. All emotions are valid. There's no big or, insignificant. There's no significant or insignificant loss. Any loss can affect you, right? And sometimes that's the thing, losing a job. Like, I didn't know that me, like sitting at home for 3 months, having no work is going to affect me that much.
Right.
Because that's what I was told, that it's just, you're going to find another job. You have work experience. You have been working in the same profession for over 10 years. It's not even a big deal. But for me, it affected my self-worth.
Yes. There you go.
Right.
Yeah.
It wasn't just the job.
Yeah. And it's showing up for a reason. And I think when we say, go away, I don't think we're helping that. It shows up for a reason, and our mind and body are trying to tell us something. And if we do need to go and tend to it.
Yeah.
I think sometimes also, you talked about breakups. And I think sometimes there's this sort of stigma or myth around, well, if I broke up with you, so I don't deserve to grieve, but you do, because you're the one that has to suffer. Sometimes people will say, well, what are you complaining about? You made the choice. And so you made the choice, and you're like, I did make this choice, but I'm still having these feelings. And so how do we work through that?
Yeah, another great point. That's the art of letting go. That's what I tell my clients, that, even though if you chose to let go of, a relationship or a job, you are still going to grieve the loss. Reason being, you have invested your emotions into, that job or relationship. And wherever you have invested emotions, it's natural and normal to grieve right?
Make a good point. Yeah, if you've invested your emotions in that, and again, you may not realize that, but it's showing up in these interesting ways.
Yeah.
And I think that was a really good point too at the beginning around grief shows up in many different forms. It's not just being sad and crying. And so that's something, again, if we're building self-awareness, we can start to connect the dots to, okay, for me, grief looks like this. And for others, it looks different. And now I know how to work through that. Can we talk about, I know you shared some tools, but maybe you can share any additional tools. You talked about journaling. Any other tools that you work through when you are doing your grief and loss work with your clients? Anything else that you find helpful or that you feel like would be worthy of sharing today?
Yeah, for tools, I would say that, of course, emotional expressivity is something I extremely I really promote when someone is grieving. Also, getting involved into something creative, like creating something, whether it's art or whatever they can. Sometimes it could be cooking as well, because there's this I read a lot of research papers, and there's this research study, and they say that, when people are grieving, it's seen that they are more engaged into creative activities. It's kind of like body's way of processing emotions. And when they're creating something, they see, they associate it with creating a new life for themselves. So there's this effect, right? So even creativity helps.
I feel like that's connected to our ancestors too. If we go way back with even chanting, singing, dancing, all these kinds of things that elders used to do way, way, way back in the day. And you know what I love about it is with loss, sometimes we feel like there's a part of us, that innocent, that childlike part is gone. And as we get older, it's like so much of a disconnect to that inner child and that innocence. Bad things happen and we get more and more closed. And I love that that's a suggestion. It helps our light ignited when we go to a creative outlet. There's always something in us that wants us to go back to that innocent way of children are allowed to cry and have tantrums and do all sorts of things, but we somehow aren't as adults, which I disagree with. So I love that creative piece. And I think sometimes we're mourning that as adults. The older we get, we really miss that, but we don't realize it because I got to work, I got to go to sleep, I got to pay the bills and these kinds of things. But we're also not meant to just exist in this life. I think we're meant to do a little more. And there's different ways to do that more. And so creativity is a great outlet.
Yes. Another one, I consider practicing self-care as a tool. And I believe that it's an ongoing process, practicing self-care. It's not like how there's this Sunday reset or, there's
bubble baths.
Stuff like that.
Yeah.
I feel that even though, and it doesn't have to be like you, going to a spa or as you said, bubble bath, taking bubble bath, stuff like that. It could be anything you do to take care of yourself. It could be drinking a glass of water or going for a walk, connecting with a loved one, right? So self-care needs to be ongoing while someone is grieving. I feel that that's another important tool.
Yeah. At my old job, I was talking to a grief and loss specialist, and one of the things that they would teach people was the grief is always there.
Yeah.
And so it's okay to take a pause and a break from it to go refuel, and whether that's being creative, drinking water, whatever that is. And you kind of need to if you want to go back into it as well. And it's such a good reminder because sometimes we hit the ground running and we think, I have to, do this really the hard way, but it's really not possible. Then we burn out. And, I always laugh at the bubble bath thing, but I agree with the self-care piece around these little ways to be connected to ourselves help us from burning out in the long run. If every day I'm spending time doing something for me, and like you said, it can be all sorts of different things, it helps us not sort of lose all of our fuel and wonder why I'm burning out, why I'm so ill, all those kinds of things that make us stop and take care of ourselves. And some people feel like that's what they have to do, is they have to really lose themselves, and whether it's illness or what. And really today we're saying you don't have to do that. That's not the only way to go through a grief and loss process.
That's right.
So do you feel if there's anything that you wish I'd asked you today, or that you want to go back and add or clarify? Is there anything that you wish I'd asked or that you want to go and add on to about grief and loss and recovery?
I feel that we talked about most of it, but I again, like a reminder for South Asian community, because I haven't really, like, of course there are like less people from our community who actually know what grief is all about. So I would like to remind them that it's a very natural and normal response of your body when you experience a significant loss, and it is more of dealing with an unmet expectation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And if you could give everyone that's part of this conversation today one thing and only one thing to take away, what would you hope that one thing is that they could take away from today?
Yes, that is going to be that being vulnerable is not something they have to avoid. They can heal only if they allow themselves to be vulnerable and feel what they're feeling.
Yeah.
And also, another thing I would like to add here, they don't have to be strong for others. I know that sometimes they feel that there's no other choice, but suppressing your own emotions and feelings and showing up as a strong person because you have to be for others, it can be very invalidating. Yeah,
I think that's so well said.
Yeah.
You said this a few times, and we'll say it again. Your words of your pain is valid. You are valid, as you said, and even if no one else sees it, right? And I think that's the thing, is everyone doesn't have to see our pain in order for it to be real. And sometimes we think, oh, you're not grieving this, so maybe I shouldn't, but it hits us all different.
Yeah.
So like your job, as you talked about. So I think that's really important to acknowledge as well. And as well, you don't have to earn your right to grieve. Sometimes we don't think we're worthy enough, and there's no earning it. Everyone is welcome, invited to go through that process, encouraged to, as you're talking about today.
Yeah.
Yeah. If people want to find you and they are curious about this and they want to start going through that process, where do they find you and how do they find you?
Yes. So I'm very active on Instagram.
Yeah.
I do have this page called Rare Mind Talks. And again, for grief and loss program, I have my own private practice as a specialist. It's called MindMakeoverServices. But anyone who would like to sign up for the program can contact me on Instagram. I do provide 30-minute of free consultation call. And also the program is at a very affordable. I truly believe that mental health support needs to be accessible. Right? And we can only make it accessible if it's affordable. So yeah, Instagram is the best way to connect with me, and my Instagram handle, it's called Rare Mind Talks.
Perfect. And we'll have that in the show notes as well for people. Okay, so lastly, what do you want to put your middle fingers up to today?
That's going to be emotional expressivity, and is a weakness. It's not a weakness. I think we all should express our emotions and find ways to express our emotions. It's
almost like it's a responsibility.
Yeah.
Hey, we all need to go through that.
Yeah.
Because if we don't talk it out, we act it out. It comes out in different ways. So we didn't get into addiction. We didn't get into those other things that sometimes we use to suppress it, which is very common in our community as well. And so I think people can say what they want, but it comes out in all sorts of ways. So today we're really encouraging us to manage it in a healthy way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Palak, I'm very, very excited to have sat down with you. Thank you for all your time and letting me ask 10,000 questions. This was really good for me. I hope you enjoyed yourself as well. And I think for people that are going through this healing process, a lot of times this is about reclaiming your voice, reclaiming who you are. And so we really want to encourage you to accept that you are worthy of this and that you deserve to go through your grieving process. And even if that meant something happened to you 100,000 years ago, it's never too late to go back and reconnect and work through that process, because chances are it's showing up today, even though it happened years ago. We also say to everyone, these conversations are door openers. We're just scratching the surface in our community when we're talking about these things. If anyone wants to be part of this conversation, wants to add on, you know where to find Palak, you know where to reach us. We're happy to keep this conversation going. Thank you to everyone. Thank you to you, Palak. It was great.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kiran. And yeah, I just want to add that this is our way of having that collective responsibility, having a contribution in that to spread this awareness about grief and loss and NLP so that people can, they know where to come if they're looking for support. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And like we said, it's a responsibility.
Yeah.
We all owe it to ourselves and
Yeah.
the community to take care of ourselves
Yeah.
in the healthiest way possible.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for today.
Yeah. Thank you.